Are you tired of posting on social media about your podcast and only hearing crickets? I know I am, or at least I was. I was getting really frustrated, especially with client content. We're posting it on social media and it's getting less and less engagement than ever before, which is really frustrating. So today we're going to be talking through some different strategies that you can use with social media to really make the most of your podcast content. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Successful Podcasting Unlocked. I'm your host, Alicia Galati. I'm the founder of Galati Media, a full-service podcast management agency where we help business owners launch and maintain lead-generating shows. Today's question is, how can I maximize social media to promote my podcast? This question is something that I think that's a lot of podcasters are really struggling with right now. I know this is something that I'm struggling with, that I'm seeing clients struggle with. And so first and foremost, I want to say that if sharing your podcast is your only social content, then you're going to continue to struggle. We have to, especially as content creators and business owners, find different ways to promote things, to talk about what we do, talk about our content in different ways than just here's a short, a reel, or a TikTok, or here's the cover art of the podcast, here's a list of what we talked about. We have to do more if we want to see that content get engagement. Now, when you think about people who are going on social media and they are scrolling through their phones, and think about even yourself, how do you interact with social media? What are the ways and the things that you save to come back to? I would bet that it's probably more educational stuff, or it's things that are funny or entertaining. When people are on social media, they're not usually looking for their next podcast episode to listen to. They're probably looking for their next book to read, their next recipe to try to create, or some tips on parenting or being, a better employee. Like there's lots of different things that people are looking for, or maybe they're just looking for entertainment, right? Cat videos, dubbed videos, things like that. They're looking for something to educate or entertain. And I think that if we as content creators realize that okay, what do I go to social media for? What do other people go to social media for? How can I make the most of this platform? Yes, you should be sharing video shorts of your podcast to grab their attention where they're scrolling. Yes, you should be grabbing highlights that are really impactful and teaching your audience something new, but take it a step further. How can you create something that is really going to create engagement so that way people can actually see the other stuff? So I want to encourage you to make a more personal posting schedule on top of your podcast schedule. Now, that should mean that you dial it back on the podcast promotion and instead focus more of your energy on the personal posting schedule. What are those educational things? What is happening in your life? Why did you create the business that you created? And how is your podcast a way to push that message forward? Another thing that I did recently that saw really good engagement was I did a roundup post of my top episodes around podcast content. So I took those episodes and that one got a lot of saves for later. That doesn't mean that everyone who saved it for later went and listened, but it created more engagement and did lead to a spike in our downloads. So that is one thing to do. Another thing is to make sure that you are actually where your audience is. So if you're a podcaster who is only focusing on Instagram, cool. Is your audience there? If you're someone who's only focusing on LinkedIn, that's great, but is your audience there? I would recommend that you focus on 1 to 2 platforms. 2 tends to be my max, especially if you're doing it all yourself and you don't have capacity to be across all the platforms, and really be strategic. So we had an episode on repurposing your content. Highly recommend you go back to that. One thing that I'm doing that I'm seeing a lot of engagement with beyond just my podcast is taking that podcast and turning it into different forms of content, whether that's a short snippet for Threads, or it's a more educational post for Instagram, or even an article on LinkedIn. Those LinkedIn articles are seeing way more engagement than even my episodes are getting. And what I love about that, and it doesn't really frustrate me, is that those are actually leading to me getting speaking engagements and me getting podcast speaking engagements. It's allowing me to connect with people on a deeper level through those articles. And those are people who may never listen to a podcast, but because they read the article, they subscribed to my LinkedIn newsletter, they're seeing that content and getting the information that I have on the podcast. So how can you do that? How can you take the content? Maybe you go through all of your past solo episodes and you turn those into educational posts for social media and then redirect people to listen. Or maybe you turn those into articles or blogs that can go on your website or places like LinkedIn, or even put them on Substack. There are so many different ways that you can take your content and make the most of it across these social media platforms. And this is one thing that I'm finding is really working for clients, is making sure that we're actually talking about things other than just the podcast content. A few additional tips, because obviously that's what you're looking for here, is make sure that you are tagging your guest when you're posting it on social media so that way they are seeing it as well and can share it with their audience. Make sure that you are sharing content of podcasts that you are enjoying or have been a guest on, so that way people can see that as well. And finally, please, 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 this is such an important part of social media, and that is be social. Have conversations with your audience, interact with them in stories or in DMs. Take it that step further to really encourage your audience to engage back with you. My friend Jillian O'Keefe, she was on the Listeners to Leads podcast. She has a mini course on Instagram, and it is so impactful for growing your audience, but also engaging with your audience in ways that you probably wouldn't even think to. And she gives you really step-by-step processes, which I love a good checklist, and that has tons of them, specifically for daily actions that you can take, as well as weekly like a boss hours that you can do to really amp up your Instagram and really make sure that you are connecting with your audience on that deeper level, communicating with them in a really authentic way, and being social on social media. So we'll make sure that we have the link for that in the show notes as well. Send me a DM, Alicia Galati. I would love to know what is working for you on social media right now. It's different for everyone. So I want to know if you are doing something different that is really working, if you are doing a lot of B-roll stuff, or maybe you're doing a lot more educational stuff, what's working on what platforms, and that way we can collaborate together, see what is working for everyone. I hope that you have a great rest of your week. Until next time, happy podcasting.